大家好，我是郑博仁律师。
1,000 prosecutors, 800 staff members, 300 investigators. That is Los Angeles County, the prosecuting agency in Los Angeles County, which is the largest prosecuting agency in the United States. I am so excited for you. I'm excited for you today because we have Jackie Lacey, who is our district attorney. She is running for a third term in office. She has been with the agency for many years, but she's been our district attorney since 2012. She will be running for her third term in November 2020. So I wanted to welcome Jackie Lacey. Jackie, are you there?
I am, and it's a pleasure to be here and actually get a chance to talk with residents, because so often you don't get this opportunity. So thank you, Paul, for inviting me to come on.
Well, I mean, how has Jackie Lacey changed from 2012 to 2020? I mean, you didn't have COVID in 2012, and now you have COVID in 2020. What's the evolution of the district attorney since then?
Well, internally, Paul, we've learned the value of technology, right? The fact that you and I have to do this interview via computers is the biggest change inside the DA's office. But I think what we've learned, most of all out of COVID and the other things that have happened, is that we're a resilient organization. The DA's office does not stop. We're resilient and we're flexible. And no matter what is going on in the world, we're going to continue to serve our community by filing cases if we need to address crime, by making sure that the process works, that people aren't stuck in there who shouldn't be in there, and that victims continue to have some place to call when they're trying to find out what's going on with their cases.
Well, a lot of people don't know you. If I had just 2 minutes or 3 minutes to get to know Jackie Lacey, what would you say about yourself?
Well, I graduated from USC Law School and UC Irvine, but I'm most proud of my high school, which is Dorsey High School in the Crenshaw district. I graduated in 1975, and I'm very proud of that school. I feel like it prepared me very well for the leadership position that I have. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, a son and a daughter. I've been to my share of track meets, soccer games, basketball games, those things. Very proud of my family. I married the guy I dated when I was 17 years old, and we just celebrated our 40th anniversary. I'm one of these leaders that you may not see all the time on television. And that's because I'm working hard to make sure that justice is done. And I use my voice when I need to use my voice. In other words, I don't believe in just filling the room with empty words. When there's something to be said, when there's a cause to be advocated for, that's when you're going to hear from me. And more importantly, I follow up, I get the job done. And what you see is what you get. Even though I'm the district attorney of the largest office in the nation, I stay grounded with my roots and never forget where I came from. I'm from a working class family. And I have those values with me even today as the leader of the largest office in the nation.
I mean, how are you able to lead it? I mean, it's such a big organization. I mean, how are you able to just maintain focus, calmness, and direction during COVID? It seems like an impossible task.
I think what helps me, Paul, is that I've spent almost more than 30 years in the organization, and I know the people and I know the culture. And I spent time building those relationships so that people know that I care about them in the organization and that I'm a trial lawyer. I've done the work. I've tried over 100 cases. And so I think the fact that I care about my people and the fact that I've done the work that I'm asking them to do, I'm not asking them to do anything that I haven't already done, permits me to lead them. Because lawyers, you just can't tell lawyers what to do. You know that, right? You can't just order a lawyer around. You have to be able to, you can tell them, handle this case, do this, But in order to truly influence, and I learned this from studying books and going to classes, people won't follow you if they don't think that you have their best interest at heart. And that takes time. That takes relationship building and proving yourself over and over again.
Well, just for people that are listening, 100 trials just for attorneys, it's really unheard of. I've done almost 10 trials, jury trials, but over 10 jury trials or 10 trials in general is probably less than 1% of all attorneys that are out there. And I just think that's a critical issue, is that the leader of an organization has to have tried cases, because otherwise, the person that you're asking to do things, you just can't trust you. And so that's very remarkable.
Thank you.
Yeah. What do you feel, just in your 30 years, have you had any cases that have really impacted you, whether emotionally or just in your practice? I mean, what case can you be able to say that really stood out or stands out in your mind?
If I had to pick one case, and there are several, with each trial, they stay in your memory forever. And especially the ones that are serious. Like I had a child molestation case. I'll never forget the look on those little girls' faces when I had to lead them up to the grown-up witness box. And they had to sit there and face the guy who had raped them. You never forget moments like that. But the case that is most significant for me, I'm an African-American woman. My parents always talked about civil rights and segregation and discrimination. So one day I got lucky enough to be assigned a hate crime murder case. And it was an African-American man in Antelope Valley, and he was murdered by a gang called the Nazi Lowriders. They hated African-Americans, and they hated all minorities. And they took this guy out in the back of a McDonald's, and they beat him to death. And I was chosen as a trial lawyer. Someone else was supposed to try the case and couldn't. So they asked me to come up and try it, in the unit. And that case was like almost a spiritual experience, because it wasn't just about getting justice for the victim, for Milton Walker. It was about, what do we really stand for when we talk about equality and that we're against racism? And so I didn't have a lot of people showing up for that trial, but the help that I had from the investigators, the FBI and the district attorney's investigative office, I was like 2 feet off the ground as I was doing that closing argument, because I knew that when I got that guilty verdict, that it would mean more about how in this day and age, we're just not going to stand for that kind of hatred, that kind of racism in our society. And Milton was homeless. He was homeless. He had a drug problem, but his life mattered. And that's really what that trial will stay with me forever. So it was the first time in the history of California that anyone had been tried under that particular statute. It was in the late 90s. And I'll never forget it. I felt like I was born to be there at that particular moment to pitch hint for the office to take that case.
Well, I know that you've also, over the past few years, you've become so passionate about sexual abuse cases, and you've really opened up the district attorney's office to be prosecuting those type of cases. Over the last 8 years, can you be able to explain to us what the district attorney has done in terms of the sex abuse cases that are out there?
So in order to help you understand their perspective, my mom, who's 83 years old, tells me for years women would suffer sexual assault and they would be afraid to come forward. And they'd be afraid to come forward because they'd be scared about what would happen to them further. Would they be further victimized? Would there be shame on their family? Would anybody believe them? So for many, many years, people didn't speak up about this crime. But it seemed like when the Harvey Weinstein case was exposed to this very powerful guy, it seems like our phone lines exploded, Paul. Victims started calling us. People started calling us saying, I was raped back in 1975, and I know you can't do anything about it, but you know what? It happened to me, and I want to report it. And so we felt, I felt that was very important. It was an important time in our history. So we expanded our sex crimes unit, and we particularly wanted people who felt they were sexually assaulted, who they felt, powerless, to come forward. And so quite a few women came forward. And what was interesting is on the cases we filed, once we file the cases, it seems like more victims then are empowered to come forward. So merely filing, even if you just file on the 1 or 2 cases where you have the evidence, that publicity gets out, and we get a lot more phone calls. So, for instance, in a recent case of the guy who was the porn industry guy, 25 women called up right after we filed that and said, you know what, this guy did it to me. So we're very proud of that, because sexual assault robs you of so much, Paul. It just does. It's not just a physical act. It robs you of your safety, your security, your personality. You're not the same after that.
Well, there's also sex trafficking. I know that many times in minority communities, there's sex trafficking that occurs. It's not really talked about, but I've noticed that over at least the last decade, the DA's office has really put an emphasis on women that have been, subject to sex trafficking.
Yeah, once again, by publicizing that we would believe you if you came forward, that really empowered women and children to call and get help. So one of the things we did is we partnered with other agencies who help support these women. And that was the thing, is because a lot of these women felt like they had nowhere else to go. They were with their sex trafficker. Where are they going to live if they don't have this guy? So that was the important thing, is not only do we have to file the case, we had to make sure there was a safe place for them to go. But I'm glad we made a pivot. We used to just prosecute sex traffickers for commercial sex without saying, well, who's making this money? Right? And there was somebody making money.
So was it your ultimate decision to make that pivot into having a more aggressive tone towards sex trafficking? Because a lot of times we don't really see sex trafficking. So we don't, it's really up to the DA's office to make that decision. It's not up front on a sidewalk or something for us to see. Was it your specific decision to say that, we have to start looking at them, looking at the victims?
Yeah, so when I took over in 2012, what we started doing is, rather than prosecuting the juveniles, we would rescue them and put them in a safe place, get them back in school. And then we would ask them questions about, well, who was it who was getting the money? And they cooperated with us. So we were able to go after the traffickers. Our culture is such that years ago, we used to make fun of people who were in sex trafficking. We would call them pimps, and we would make fun of them and not really realize what they were engaging in was slavery, modern day slavery. So now by looking into this, we discovered that gangs were leaving behind drugs and getting into just kidnapping women and children off the street and forcing them into trafficking. And it was much more lucrative, Paul, because then you could sell a person's body over and over again. So that's one huge change that we made. Instead of going after the victims, we, for sex trafficking, we now go after those who are engaged in sex trafficking and who are making a lot of money off of this. The sentences we have gotten have been something you've never seen in the past. Some of these folks are going away for life.
How about residents that have mental health issues? That's always been something that's swept under the rug. Has the DA's office over the last few years, especially after you've taken over, kind of looked at mental health and criminality and kind of made any changes or thoughts on that?
Yes. Before I was elected, I promised this would be a priority for me. I had seen it in my own life and wanted to see a change in how we treated people who had a mental health issue. So as a result of convening a group of experts and committed people, we now have the first mental health division that I know of in the nation in the DA's office. And if you talk to defense attorneys in the know, they'll tell you there used to be no one who would listen to a claim of mental health or mental illness. And now you've got Gilbert Wright, Tracy Whitney, these folks who should be on speed dial for you, who you can call and say, I've got a case. And this is not what I would call a get out of jail free card. If somebody doesn't have a mental health issue, please don't bring their case to us. But if you've got a legitimate history of someone who has a diagnosed mental health issue and it's what's causing the crime, then we're willing to listen and look for ways to get them treatment rather than jail. So the DA's office, of all places, you wouldn't expect the DA to lead this. And I had no idea when I first started out how receptive the community would be to this, because you're right, there's a stigma associated with it. No one wants to admit it. There's shame. But there shouldn't be. This should be something where we help families get help before they come, before you have to call the police, before you have to get the criminal justice system involved.
Well, let's go back just to campaigning. I'm a city councilman for the city of Arcadia, and I had so much negative campaigning that was against me, and I tried to maintain a very bright, positive, didn't attack back. I've noticed the same thing with you in that I don't see anything negative coming out from your campaign. I'm just kind of wondering, how do you stay positive? I mean, the city of Arcadia is so small. I mean, we're talking about LA County. I mean, LA County, it's huge. And this negative campaigning that's occurring, how do you stay positive? How do you have that positive image? It's shocking.
Well, this may not be popular to say, but I pray a lot, because I realize that a lot of the negative stuff that comes out about me is lie. It's just well-funded lies. I worry about the impact this has on my family, because they know the truth. I signed up for this, so you don't have to run for office, but congratulations to you for wanting to run for office, Paul, because we need good people in government. We need honest people in government. And if we treat them like crap, no one good will want to run. That said, I have faith in the voters that in the end, we care about the same things. I care about justice. The voters care about justice. I care about safety in the community. It bothers me when I hear that car burglaries are going up. That bothers me when I hear about innocent people getting shot, people getting robbed. I don't like seeing the looting that has occurred. It bothers me even to think about some of the victims that have experienced looting probably were already hurting due to COVID. And a lot of the small business people, they're not wealthy. They're not people who have a lot. They're trying to feed their family. And so I believe you got to believe in yourself, and you got to believe in the message you're carrying. In the end, though, it'll be up to the voters. And I just get up every morning grateful that I'm alive, grateful that I have this opportunity to serve as the district attorney. And I just speak the truth with authenticity. And I think that's what voters are looking for. They're looking for somebody real. I know when I'm looking to vote for someone, I'm not necessarily looking to see if they agree with me on everything. I want them to agree with me on some things and some basic things. But I want somebody who's real, who's honest, who I can trust, who I can believe in, who in an emergency, they're not going to be afraid to step up and make the hard choices.
Well, what made you run for the DA in the first place? You were a prosecutor, successful, you're in an organization, you can be able to just continue to be in your division. What was the passion that drove you to say, you know what, I have to just take that leap of faith and, I'm just going to run for the DA? Because that's a very, very, very difficult position to win. I mean, you're among a bunch of attorneys that, want that one position? I mean, what drove you to say, I'm going to take that initial step?
Paul, I started after the election of the first African-American president, Barack Obama. I never thought I would see something like that happen. And it really got me to thinking about, am I putting limits on myself? In other words, why couldn't I be the DA? Just because there had never been a woman before I was elected, just because there had never been an African-American, why couldn't I? And what was holding me back from imagining myself running that office? And I realized that it was just fear of failure, fear of what if, fear of the scrutiny, the extra scrutiny you get when you're running for office. And I knew I had good ideas. I knew that this mental health issue was something I could change. I knew that human trafficking, I could see the laws changing, and I knew that was going to be a big issue. I knew I could improve upon what my predecessor did, Steve Cooley. He really, he was very courageous in how he attacked 3 strikes. I felt like I could continue that legacy. And then it became, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to trust that it's going to work out well. So people have to remember that back then, I didn't get a lot of endorsements at all. Elected officials were like, well, who the heck are you? Nobody knows you. And even the governor at that time, Jerry Brown, was endorsing somebody else. And we pulled off an upset. And that's what I love about the democracy here in the United States is you don't necessarily have to be wealthy. You don't have to be well connected. All you got to do is have the right message and be there at the right time. Be lucky, be authentic, have the right message and know what you're talking about and have a well-run campaign. And you can win.
Well, now you're running for the 3rd term. I mean, what is really separating you from the competition? In March, you won nearly half of the vote, for the DA, and it's to me, it seems like you're going to win again, but why a 3rd term? Some people say, well, after 2 terms, why a run again?
Right. Well, people don't realize that 8 years goes by just like that. It goes by very fast. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about changing the criminal justice system, particularly with regard to mental health, it took probably 50, 60 years of neglect of us neglecting mental health issues to get into this position. I started the mental health change revolution, if you will. I knew from the get-go it was going to take at least 10 years to straighten it out, to make sure that things were advocated for, things were in place, because if you're going to divert people from jail, they've got to go somewhere. And I want to see it completed. And I think I have the necessary capital and political capital, as well as relationship capital, to get the job done. And I want to see it done all the way through. So I'm running for a 3rd term because people on the inside will tell you there is a tremendous change in that DA's office. And I have led that change, and I want to continue to lead the change. The guy I'm running against, he was a DA for the same amount of time in San Francisco, and yet he dropped out of the race there. He dropped out, left, actually quit early. And it was because there was a lot of criticism of him in San Francisco. Property crime was going up through the roof there. And the DAs were leaving the offices. And he came down here and decided that he was going to challenge me. He's already got a track record up in San Francisco, and it was not good. So if you quit there, if you didn't do well there, what makes you think you can do well here? Here's one endorsement I want people to remember when they're thinking about who to vote for DA. Mayor London Breed is the mayor of San Francisco. She has endorsed me in this race to be the district attorney. That ought to tell you a lot about what it was like when he was running that prosecutor's office. And that's what I tell people. That in and of itself ought to cause you to pause. If, in fact, he was that great there, then why isn't the mayor endorsing him?
Well, I think the voters are a little bit confused in the sense that don't you need to have been part of the district attorney's office or to live in LA County to run for DA? It just seems a little bit confusing, at least to me, that somebody outside of LA County or even out of Southern California would be running in our district. Is there any requirement? It's just baffling to me, that's all.
Right. The requirements to run for LA County District Attorney is that you be an attorney, and at the time you put in your papers to run that you live here. He moved down here and then immediately filed to run within a week or so. That's the only requirement. I tell you what ought to be a requirement to run that office. It ought to be required that you at least have done 1 or 2 trials. This attorney, Gascon, hasn't done any trials. He's not been to court on the record on anything, Paul. And it's important to the voters because the decisions that I make about whether to file cases or not file cases are based on my lifelong experience of what it takes to try a case, what it takes to convince 12 jurors. When you have someone who doesn't even respect the profession enough to have bothered in the years that he's been an attorney to even try one case and say, I can run an office that's basically a litigation office, that's arrogance. And it's dangerous for LA County residents.
For just with budgeting and COVID, is the budget with Governor Newsom, are they looking to reduce money to the district attorney's office? And if so, how are you going to be able to manage it? You know, coming out of COVID, there's going to be many, many more cases that you have to file, just because COVID has frozen so many of the cases that are there. How are you handling the budgeting process?
Well, the district attorney's office got cut by 8% by the Board of Supervisors. And so what that means is we won't have as many lawyers to do the work. We won't have as many DA investigators to investigate the cases, and we won't have as many support staff people. With an 8% cut, I'm still going to be able to do the essential job functions. We're still going to be able to prosecute crime. But if it goes any deeper than that, I do worry about that. We would focus, of course, on violent crime because that's, a life is more important than property. But I do worry about us not being able to aggressively go after cyber criminals, which is, one of the fastest growing crimes, or go after white collar criminals, people who stiff you out of money by scams. That would be, you would probably see the big difference there because we just wouldn't be able to continue to prosecute a lot of those cases because we really would have to focus in on the murders, the rapes, the robberies, things of that nature. That said, I'm like everybody else. I'm hopeful that maybe some money will come from the federal government. I'm hopeful that businesses will open back up. We get a lot of our budget revenue through the county through sales tax. And so remember during COVID, people weren't shopping. I think that has picked up a bit from what I can see. And so there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but I do worry about another closure, what that would do to our economy and to our budget. But right now we're managing. We're doing fine. We're managing. We haven't had to lay anybody off yet, but we're getting the job done and getting the cases prosecuted.
Well, I know that the district attorney's office has been one of the leaders of cybercrime just over the last 10 years, and the internet has changed things so much. But the DA's office, what has it really done within the last 10 years that you've been there in terms of cybercrime? It's such a unique and different area of the law.
Well, our unit has become, our cybercrime unit has become the go-to unit. One of our first victims of cyber crimes when I got into office was the county of LA. The county of LA their system was hacked into, Social Security numbers were stolen, things happened, and we were able to disrupt that and actually identify the sources of where that's coming from. A lot of times it's not within the county. So our unit has a laboratory. We are able to trace things down very quickly in terms of where they come from. We train a lot to prevent, because the best cure for cybercrime is to know. Don't ever give your personal information over the phone. Don't ever do that. Don't ever, put in your Social Security number just because someone sends you an email. Do not do that. So we train on prevention, but we also have a lab that's able to go in and trace those things down and dismantle. We have what's called a community CERT team. We're actually able to help businesses that have had a cyber intrusion stop the intrusion from happening. So we're the go-to people.
And I also know over the last 8 years that elder abuse cases, that the DA's office seems to have really taken an emphasis and a focus to make sure elders in Los Angeles County haven't been abused. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we've always been in the business, Paul, of addressing what I would call physical elder abuse. Someone who is beaten, someone who isn't a senior who hasn't been fed, things of that nature. But we noticed an explosion of those financial scams. The famous one in the Chinese community is the blessing scam. You put in your money, someone else puts in their money, and it gets blessed by some religious figure. So what we do is we put out videos to educate the community, the seniors, because the seniors, they may not have access to the internet. They may not know about these scams. So what we did was partner with service organizations to really get the word out. To seniors, we put out pamphlets. In Wheels for Meals, we put pamphlets in those meals to make sure that seniors know. So we've really just embarked on educating them, because we think if we empower seniors, if we tell them, they'll tell one another what's going on. And so we've really focused in on just educating them in very creative videos and creative ways to let them know, don't fall for the scams.
So what is a typical day like for you? I mean, again, you have 1,000 attorneys, prosecutors that you have to take care of, 800 staff members, 300 investigators. I mean, what is a typical day like for Jackie Lacey?
Well, I try to get up before the sun does. And the first thing is looking at emails, because we're in touch with people on the East Coast a lot of times. So emails come nonstop to our office. I try to read all the news clips, not on just criminal justice cases that are occurring in LA County, but those are occurring across the United States, because then I'd be able to identify if there are any trends or any problems that I need to issue. If it wasn't COVID, I would normally be out the door speaking at some breakfast club or something like that with the community. And then I would come into the office, and in the office, the phone rings, people come in, people want to talk about either policy or cases, and their cases in various different stages. Some of them are being investigated, some of them are closed out, some of them are in trial. So it's constantly updating. My cell phone, I often have to recharge it during the day because I'm on the phone a lot. There are phone calls coming in, text messages coming in. I'm in touch with pretty much almost every major leader in LA County. And in the evening, when I come home, it doesn't stop. Phone rings, emails come in. It's the same as your job. Sometimes there are evening meetings, things that you have to speak about. Right now, I'm campaigning virtually, so that adds another layer of responsibility. When you sign up for this job, they tell you it's 24/7. We will reach you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you got to be available to take that call.
On top of everything that you're doing, I heard that you actually, before COVID, would try to read to children once a week. Is that true, or is that just something that I heard?
Well, this was before I became DA. We have a program called Project Lead, where our lawyers and investigators and support staff can can be assigned to a classroom, a 5th grade classroom, and teach that class. So I was doing that before I became DA. 1 day a week, I was heading into Lorena Street in Boyle Heights, Lorena Street Elementary School, and I had a 5th grade class under Norma Higuera, and I was teaching for a while. I miss that. I'd love to do that again. Our office is still engaging in that. We're in 200 different classrooms throughout LA County. And what's important about it, Paul, is we're reaching kids before they get into middle school and before they can be reached by, outside influences, and letting them know, make the right decisions, make good decisions.
A lot of people of color, minorities, they feel somewhat disenfranchised. They don't really know how important their vote is. I mean, this November, do you believe that it's still important to vote? Because a lot of people have just said, because of COVID, I'm not voting.
Yeah.
What is your feeling in regard to that?
My father, who probably couldn't vote most of his life, he's a man from Texas, always talked about the importance of voting. That voting is your way of saying how you want your government to look, how you want your world to look. Voting during COVID will be a challenge, but I understand from the Secretary of State that everybody's going to get a ballot to mail in. So you don't necessarily have to go in. And I want to encourage everybody, please vote. It's so important. There are going to be laws, initiatives on the ballot. And they used to say, don't complain if you don't vote. I say, if you got a complaint, vote. If you want things to go a certain way, vote. Because if you don't, sometimes you look up the next day and you realize, wow, I didn't expect this to happen, or I didn't expect this person to win, and it's too late then. Voting is so very important that we ought to be talking to kids 15, 16 years old to get them ready to vote at 18 about how important it is, because that's how you shape our country.
You spoke about the vote as your voice and the vision. What is a vote for Jackie Lacey? What does that mean when someone looks at the ballot and puts you as the person to lead the DA? What is that vision that you have for the DA's office?
Well, the vision that I have is that the criminal justice system isn't perfect, Paul. There are a lot of things that need to change, and those things I am changing, and I intend to change for the better, because the bottom line is, if you're sending people to jail and they come out and they commit the same crimes, you're failing. And so you really need to focus in on what can you do to ensure that people abandon a life of crime. But what a vote for me really also stands for is, while we're talking about criminal justice reform, we can never forget about the victims of crime. Whether we like it or not, some people hurt people, and there need to be consequences for that. Otherwise, you're going to have people just committing crimes against others without worrying about the consequences. And while I believe that you need someone who is reform-minded, and I am, you need somebody to support law enforcement, because right now they are taking it in the shorts. We've painted them with this broad brush as though all of them are racist, all of them are bad. That's really not true. And if we look at our experiences with them, that's simply not true. In LA County, for instance, the law enforcement of today doesn't look anything like it did when I was a kid in the 70s. It's very different, very community oriented. And we have to change, of course, and make sure that people's lives don't unnecessarily get taken. We got to change. We've got to retrain our officers in de-escalation. Well, we also have to support them because we need them, and we know we need them. You know, in the time of crisis, you do not want to pick up the phone and call 911 and they tell you, we'll get you somebody maybe today, maybe tomorrow. That's just unacceptable.
Well, you know, a lot of residents in LA County have been curious as to the environment. You know, it's being in California, that's a really big issue. Has the DA's office in any way gone after environmental issues. It doesn't seem like a criminal act, but at the same time, many people really wonder about that. Is the DA even involved in any environmental issues?
Well, we have been for a long time. Even before I was DA, we addressed environmental issues. The biggest environmental issue that LA County DA's office addressed while I was DA was the leak by Southern California Gas Company in Porter Ranch. If those of you might remember, that leak was going on for quite some time, and they never notified the residents so that people could move out or get out of there. And instead, when people came forward and started experiencing nosebleeds and other health issues, that was when we learned what had happened. There was a failure to report that. So we have a unit. They prosecuted Southern California Gas. They got a guilty plea from the corporation, and more importantly, an agreement to remedy a lot of the things that led to a failure to report that leak. So we have a unit that, in fact, responds whenever there's an environmental issue. There's a lot of things in California right now that we should be concerned about in terms of the environment. And when there is a crime, the LA County District Attorney's Office responds, and we have people who are extremely knowledgeable in this very complicated area of the law.
Well, in terms of COVID and employer-employee relations, a lot of employees feel, and employers too, there's just so much confusion about what's going on, and really a lot of employees feel really abused by the current situation. Is there anything that the DA's office has done or will be doing in regard to OSHA, safety-related issues? Has the DA even cared about this issue before?
Right. We, along with our environmental crimes unit, we do have an OSHA unit with the environmental crimes unit. And if there's an OSHA violation where an employee dies because of some issue related to a workplace, then the DA's office will respond. They'll roll out and with an investigator and talk to witnesses there. Because what happens is when something happens in the workplace that endangers the life of an employee, immediately right after it happens, the employees are willing to talk, the other employees. But if you wait too long, then they start worrying about keeping their job and they're willing to talk. So we're doing that. I think with COVID, we have to remember it's uncharted territory. We don't, we have HIPAA rules that prevent you from disclosing who is positive. And yet, when someone is positive, you've got to go back and notify everybody that they've come in contact with and clean up the location to make sure that no one is infected. So we're in uncharted territory. And running an office myself, we're nervous about the uptick in LA County of positive tests. Those who are asymptomatic may not even know they have it, may not even know they're spreading it. And so what we're telling our employees is we're going to do our best to protect you by cleaning and having personal protective equipment, but bring your own too and be involved in protecting yourself from the spread of this disease.
So, Jackie, COVID has just thrown a wrench into campaigning in general. I know that people have said that you literally go from door to door to meet voters to let them know about you. But how are you able to do so now? It seems, of course you're the DA, of course you've been there for 8 years, but you're still a person that wants to go door to door. How has COVID changed? How are you even campaigning?
Well, it is challenging. You can't go to door to door, right? Because it's unsafe to be exposed to that many people and to expose that many people to you. The way I'm doing it is there are Zoom calls that I'm on, virtual meetings, those kinds of things. I'm doing endorsement interviews all through the computer. I'm calling people randomly. And sometimes, the interesting thing about COVID, Paul, is people are home, right? They're not out. It's not like they're going to be out at an event or a dinner or something like that. Generally, people are home and they're home in the evenings. And so I've just called people. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes that one phone call, people are shocked. The DA of LA County wants me. Some people are like, okay, what did I do, right? But for the most part, they're thrilled to even get that call, any kind of human contact, because people are not traveling. They're not out and about. You can't have in-person fundraiser with more than 5 or 6 people, and so you got to get creative. And I've been basically calling people just when I have downtime or anytime, get on the phone and just call them and talk to them and listen to them. That's important too. As an elected official, you've got to listen to what people have to say. So that's basically how I've been campaigning, and I think that's the way almost all political figures now are campaigning. You're not seeing that many big rallies. You're not seeing a lot of fundraisers. You're just seeing elected officials just calling and talking to people.
Well, just to wrap things up, are there any last points that you wanted to just express to people just for the November 2020? It seems like a long time just because COVID has made every day seem so long. But November is just right around the corner. Is there anything that you wanted to tell, any last statements that you want to make to residents of LA County?
Yeah, I think your prosecutor's office, most people won't have contact with the DA's office because most people won't be the victim of crimes and most people won't be defendants. But your DA's office, we are the guardians of justice, okay? And how your district attorney's office performs and how your district attorney performs is extremely important to your safety. And we often remind people that we protect the community through the fair and ethical pursuit of justice and the safeguarding of crime victims' rights. It's very, very important for people to show up and vote because oftentimes politicians win by default, and that's never a good thing. It's never a good thing. And so I want people to understand that I have a heart, I care about the community, I have implemented a lot of changes, and I want to continue to do that. I want to continue to serve as their district attorney. And more importantly, I want them to understand that it's very important that you have someone who is honest, who cares, who is effective, who can do the job and do it in a fair and balanced manner, understanding that you need someone who understands that everyone in this county deserves to live in a safe community.
Well, I wanted to thank the District Attorney, Jackie Lacey, for her 8 years of service, but really her 30 years of service with the District Attorney's Office. And we look forward to having you in November as our continued District Attorney. Thank you for everybody that took the time to watch. If you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you. God bless you. And be safe during COVID. Take care.
Thank you. You too, Paul. Be safe. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.